How does the migration of high-skilled knowledge workers affect their origin and destination countries? This is a topic of much debate, as there are both positive and negative effects, and assessing the aggregate implications is difficult. In origin countries, for example, the negative effects of brain drain may be offset if immigrants provide a channel for cross-country transfers of knowledge. This paper develops a framework that links individual-level migration decisions to aggregate patterns of innovation, knowledge diffusion, and economic growth. The author focuses on the migration of inventors across the EU-US corridor, and to illustrate some of the dynamics at play, she uses patent data to establish 4 empirical facts. First, migration flows between the US and the EU are asymmetric. There is net immigration, or brain gain, into the US, and net emigration, or brain drain, out of the EU. Second, migrants in both directions tend to become more productive after they migrate. This figure compares the average number of patents filed by migrants in the years before and after migration with the average number filed by similar inventors who never moved internationally. Relative to this group, migrants increase their patent applications by 42% per year on average after they move. This is not a causal statement, as the decision to migrate is not random, but it suggests that inventors tend to move to places where they are more productive. A third fact is that migration affects an inventor's collaboration network. Local inventors in the EU and the US mostly collaborate with other locals in the same location, but networks are more varied for migrants. Inventors who move from the EU to the US, for example, collaborate more frequently with US locals after they migrate. Note, however, that migrants in both directions continue to collaborate with inventors at their origin after they move. In fact, local inventors become more productive after their co-inventor emigrates. Relative to a placebo group of inventors with collaborators who don't move, those exposed to a co-inventor's migration increase their patent applications by 18% per year on average after the migration. This suggests that emigrants facilitate cross-country collaborations and help diffuse knowledge back to their countries of origin. To quantify these effects, the author matches the empirical patterns to a model that links micro-level migration decisions to macro implications. In this framework, individual inventors decide where to move based on where they expect to be most productive and earn the highest profits. Their decisions shape aggregate migration flows between countries and determine global patterns of talent allocation and innovation. Crucially, the model incorporates interaction networks that give rise to knowledge spillovers. Inventors learn by collaborating with one another, and, mirroring the data, they are more likely to meet and interact with others in the same location. This means that inventors from one country are more likely to collaborate with those from another if they migrate. This structure gives rise to brain drain. In the model, the most talented individuals tend to move to countries at the technological frontier, as this is where they can learn the most and be most productive. This decreases the number of inventors in the origin country, but emigrants also transfer knowledge from the frontier as they continue collaborating with inventors at their origin. To illustrate these opposing effects, the author simulates the impact of 2 interventions that replicate real-world policies in the EU-US context. First, Suppose the EU were to cut taxes for foreigners and return migrants in an effort to reduce brain drain. In the short run, this policy has the desired effect. Net emigration from the EU declines as the tax cut attracts both US immigrants and return migrants. Innovation, productivity, and output in the EU all increase. But in the long run, there is a net negative impact on the EU due to a reduction in US innovation and knowledge spillovers. Productivity growth in the EU increases by 5% in the first 25 years, but ultimately declines by 6% in the long run. The effectiveness of this policy therefore depends on the relevant time horizon for policymakers. A similar dynamic applies to another often discussed migration policy, immigration restrictions. The paper simulates the impact of doubling the number of immigrants allowed to enter the US, which mimics an expansion of the H-1B visa cap. In the short run, this exacerbates brain drain from the EU and widens its productivity gap with the US. Over time, however, there are global benefits. Relaxing the immigration cap allows inventors to better sort to where they are most productive and increases innovation in the US. Over the long run, this leads to net productivity gains in the EU due to more significant knowledge spillovers and technology diffusion. Thus, this paper provides a framework for studying the aggregate effects of high-skilled migration. Note that while the focus here is on the link between individual migration decisions and global patterns of innovation, this is by no means the only important question. The movement of high-skilled individuals affects many outcomes, including demographics and inequality, all of which are fertile areas for further research. To read more on this topic, you can check out the paper's references to other related work. These include papers on knowledge diffusion, innovation and economic growth, and their links to migration.